Welcome to another edition of Frenemies of the People. We are sponsored by Stanza della Lacrime. If you know what that is, you get extra credit. That's Patrick, that's Eleni, that's Cianna. We all work together, but we also like to get together to talk about politics and the media and hatwear. I guess we'll get into the hatwear a little bit later at Eleni's haberdashery. So we have a pope. He's from Chicago. Just happened recently by the time this is released to the public. He's from Chicago, but really, he's from Dalton. Okay. So now the question is there's two important questions. He's now the most famous person from Dalton. Is that what we can agree on, team?
Uh, yes, I think so. I think he is now the most famous person coming out of there. But he is not. There is somebody that is infamous that will always take first place. So
That's fair.
it's a two-part competition there that I think there are two champions now out of that
Ma-
area, which is great.
Mayor Tiffany Henyard. We love her.
Hmm.
She makes good copy. Also, the most important question for millions of Catholics, millions of Chicagoans, a very Chicago question. Cubs fan or Sox fan? So that became that took over the internet at some point when the announcement of the Pope was made. ABC News, David Muir, their lead anchor, and Terry Moran, one of their top correspondents, reported that he was a Cubs fan who grew up on the South Side and therefore he knew suffering and also showed a strength of character. But the problem is that uh, Channel 9 in Chicago went down and spoke to his brother, who said, I don't know where that came from. He's a Sox fan. The Sun Times found a photo of him at the 2005 White Sox World Series. I suppose that could be AI. I think that if I ever became Pope, first of all, monkeys would fly out of my butt first. But I think one of my brothers would probably troll the globe and say that I was a Sox fan when I'm really a Cubs
Right.
fan. So we really don't know until
That's
we hear from the Pope
exactly
himself.
exactly what I was thinking this morning is isn't that like the total brotherly troll thing to do is
Right.
brother just is making news and you're like, "Oh, actually no, he's an avid diehard fan of the opposing team that he doesn't like just to mess with him." I mean, that's who knows. I mean, at this point, we don't know.
We could all agree, though, he's definitely not a Green Bay Packers fan. So
Right.
they could have went for the low hanging fruit and just assured folks of that, or united that we have a holy father who would agree that football is what the NFL plays and soccer is what the rest of the world play. They're missing the big story here. I mean, that's the lack of devotion to Green Bay Packers is the Bears could use the help.
But I
Last
think
night, already the late night comics were talking about the Pope.
Dubbo.
I think also in that interview with his brother, he eventually said that his their mother lived on the north side. So I think that was the assumption that he was a Cubs fan. But he did confirm that he was a Sox fan. So I'm gonna say he's a Sox fan all the way through and through. Um, yeah, that's what I'm gonna say.
It seems like it's probably true. He grew up in the far south suburbs, but as they used to say at the late great City News Bureau of Chicago, if your mother says she loves you, check it out. So there were some pretty in-depth reports on Pope Leo the 14th, formerly known as Robert Prevost. It took 9 reporters from the Tribune to cover the story, and they did a good job. But just one scrappy Lauren Fitzpatrick at the Sun Times, and Lauren actually had a profile of the future pope a week before he was announced, before the conclave took place, because he was viewed as an influential player among the College of Cardinals. So her work was referenced by other outlets for days. and she was making network news appearances. It only took 4 votes, like a true Chicago politician, Eleni, but he was able to clear the field. That is the fewest number of votes since, let's see, Pope Pius in 1939. So it's a pretty good way to run up the score, come up with a resounding victory at Vatican City.
Yeah, I mean, I would say he probably did it the Chicago and Illinois way, which is he locked it up behind closed doors, and it wasn't until the vote was happening that we already knew the conclusion.
The one thing about
140 votes out of 133 cast.
right,
It's a miracle.
you know, the one thing that anyone from Chicago knows how to do, Patrick, is count noses. I think that gives us a competitive advantage in the outside world. Of course, this being Chicago, after we got done with the deep dish pizza memes and the White Sox Cubs debate and the Bears debate, the Sun-Times Watchdogs got in the act. Of course, that's the investigative unit at the Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Public Media. And so Bob Herguth, who has been chronicling the clergy sex abuse story for many years, he has a story where he recounts a recent email exchange, like just a couple of years ago, with the future Pope over a question of the Augustinian order, of which he was a leader, allegedly harboring a priest who was allegedly accused of being an abuser, and they were had him living near a school setting. And so, according to the Sun Times in 2021, a friend of the future pope told Herget, "Well, you should just ask Bob. He's a good guy." And so Herget emailed the then cardinal, future pope, who responded, "I'm glad you're enjoying good weather in Chicago. I will be traveling international over the coming week." And so he asked for the questions to be emailed, which I'm not saying that he had a public affairs and crisis advisor, but maybe, because that's a pretty good, way to slow things down a little bit. So Hergeth, again, being Bob, and we love Bob, he followed up with questions via email, uh, which, again, these are Bob's words, not mine. Uh, he asked in this email if the future pope had, quote, any idea if when the Chicago province is going to put a public list of the credibly accused, and if so, when, and if not, why not? Any idea why it's taken so long, even after our cardinal called for greater transparency in 2018? And Cardinal Prevost, future Pope Leo XIV, did not respond to Bob Herget. Now, in fairness to the Augustinians and to the future Pope, in 2024 they did release a list. So sometimes these things take time. Um, leave it to the watchdogs, Patrick.
They're very thorough. And, what is interesting, if we think about this is a pope who did come from a major media market. And there are people that know him in stories and photos and all of these things. And it's an advancement of the times. And I will enjoy all the stories that come out and the anecdotes and the fact that even though it was at a 2005 World Series for the White Sox, how wonderful that people can share that connection. It's truly unique.
Yeah, I think it also shows just the involvement of time. And, now, in our, at least when I was growing up, and I'm not Catholic, but obviously know of the Pope, know the, in my mind, it's always this older man that's, been praying his whole life. And, now we've got somebody was at the White Sox World Series, and someone else, another reporter, I can't remember who exactly, posted a picture where he was at Aurelio's Pizza a couple months ago, not even that long ago. Like, just, he's like your regular guy. And that's what people nowadays in general, not just from the Pope. I mean, we're lucky now we have someone of that nature, but just from elected officials. And, that's what people are looking for, somebody that they can connect to, because these are the people that are representing you. And so I think it's really interesting to see that now taking shape and form in religious entities as well. And I think we've seen probably that in various denominations of just younger priests that just have a little bit more of a updated take on life, where they're bringing more young people in now because they're connecting with them on issues that are important to life right now, and not necessarily, I'm sure some of the Sunday school experiences the rest of us could talk about.
It is funny to think that we have a pope who has tasted the sweet, sweet taste of giardiniera and Italian beef over there.
And I also think that, like, yes, Chicago has been in the spotlight, but now the city is in the spotlight even more. It has this microscope on it. And I think about just the tourism attraction that is going to get an even larger kick out of this. When people are either going to the White Sox games, or they're going to the south side of Chicago, or they're going to the Italian beef spots that I still have yet to check out, but that is on my list now, just from, these conversations alone. So I think
Those
this is
video slots in Dalton are going to be hot. All that international press corps coming, they're going to say, thankfully, Illinois has a slot machine every third bar stool to take care of your international needs and visitors.
Well, by this time, many Chicagoans have seen that Chicago's mayor weighed in with a post on X. Everything dope, including the Pope, comes from Chicago.
the greatest freaking city.
Greatest freaking city with the dopest Pope, Popest city. So the mayor and Chicago public schools had their own conclave of sorts to select an interim superintendent of schools. The Tribune reported that board members say that Mayor Johnson's hand-picked school board president, Sean Harden, is leading an effort to vote down a resolution that requires the next interim leader of the schools to have a license to be a school superintendent. And the reason for that is he wants to install his current City Hall chief of staff, Christina Paciona Zayas, better known to folks in Chicago politics as CPZ. And he would like her to serve in that temporary role. So this may actually be something that the teachers union has some concerns with, but I'm guessing that much like the other conclave, that's being settled behind closed doors. But what do you all think of that?
I do not want to go continually on record agreeing with Democratic mayors of Chicago, but I will say I believe the requirement to have a license to be a superintendent is absolutely ludicrous, and people should be able to hire the best, most talented person to run a school district. Maybe, one that's financially challenged. Financial expertise could be valued more. Management consulting could be valued as skills. So while I agree with the policy that they are trying to implement, I disagree with the choice that's probably being made here, and how it's being done and why. But this, you cannot look at the amount of money spent in public education. You cannot look at the outcomes we're getting and decide that we should only self-select from a very small list of people who have grown up through the system, because the system needs change.
Want to hire the best of the best, and can't speak specifically to who the candidates are, but I would say that should be their choice, to hire the best of the best.
Point of fact, there was a brief period in Illinois political history where the Republicans controlled the legislature, and during that time, Mayor Richard M. Daley supported a bill that outsiders thought took power away from him, but it actually gave him more power and responsibility for Chicago public schools and allowed him to have the control over it. And to some extent, Mayor Johnson, for all of his union experience with the Chicago Teachers Union, may now realize how important it is to be able to move the levers of power at the Chicago Public Schools in order to get things done. And that was difficult for him over the past year with Pedro Martinez, the outgoing school CEO. Okay, let's take a drive down to Springfield. And this is a time, I think, to have Eleni explain why she's wearing that ridiculous hat.
First of all, why is it ridiculous? Everyone who's traveled to Springfield knows about Wally's. This is one of my many Wally's hats that I have in my collection. It's one of the best rest stops in the state of Illinois and probably in the country. For those of you who have been there, you know. For many years, it was under construction, and so it was a running joke. When you were driving to and from Springfield, there'd be big signs and billboards that say, like, Wally's coming soon, over 50 urinals, hand washing machines. And so, anyway, Wally's is the best, but I'm assuming it's incredibly busy this week and for the rest of this month as folks are going back and forth from Springfield. We continue to just see a lot of talk about the budget and how difficult this year's budget's going to be. This is going to be likely the hardest budget that Governor Pritzker has had to deal with since he took office, given everything that had happened over the last couple of years. And I think we're seeing that there are going to be cuts, and that's something that we don't normally see coming out of Springfield. And it's going to be interesting to see where those cuts are made, and how that's all going to be nuanced, because like I said, this hasn't really happened before in Springfield, at least in my time. So it'll be interesting to see how this all shakes out in the end. But tough
I
one.
think that's the case for most of those legislators, that they've only known fairly decent revenue pictures,
Mm-hmm.
fairly decent revenue environment,
Mm-hmm.
and especially during the COVID federal dollar flow
Right.
time period.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is, and like you said, many of the members of the legislature are newer. We don't have folks like that have been there for decades in the past. And so it's just going to be interesting to see how exactly they're going to be able to manage all of this.
Well, there's so many exciting things going on, but there's also so many terrible things. And I would like to lead off so that we could have the big finish with Eleni and that hat of hers. First of all, I don't believe that the rumors are true that Eleni Demirtas is the Greek American who is thinking about running for mayor of Chicago. But I think if she was harboring that idea, that hat, it's probably not going to help. No one in Chicago goes to Wally's other than legislators. The other thing that I think is terrible is killer robots. So Paul Tudor Jones, who is a billionaire hedge fund manager, went on CNBC to report that he was just at a Chatham House Rules conference. So somehow he respected the Chatham House rules, but still talked about what was taking place in the Chatham House. I think Chatham House rules are kind of like Las Vegas. Um, so uh, they were talking about AI. And he found it very disturbing that there's very little money being put to security. And he found it even more disturbing. And I would share this concern that everybody on the panel seemed to agree that AI will kill 50% of humanity in the next 20 years. 10% chance that AI will kill 50% of humanity in the next 10 years. Now it's just 10% odds. I don't like 10% odds when it comes to killer robots. So that's a problem. And then further, the next day, Ted Cruz, the senator from Texas, went on CNBC to say that indeed in a YouTube channel discussion, sort of like ours, Elon Musk told Senator Cruz that there was a 10 to 20% chance that AI will annihilate humanity. And then Senator Cruz concluded that, well, he's not for killer robots, but if there are going to be killer robots, he wants them to be American killer robots. And so, buy an American killer robot. It sounds terrible. I toss it to you, Patrick.
Well, my terrible is associated with the rebirth of spring. And not only have we managed to have a robin give birth to 4 baby robins that lived on our deck, and that was super exciting. And they now have flown the nest, and we learned a lot about that. But the bunny who decided to give birth in our backyard last year has returned. And I am just thrilled at the opportunity of trying to either relocate the bunnies before they eat all of our landscaping or re-landscaping everything so that our kids are not traumatized by the relocation of the bunnies. But nature's wonderful, spring is wonderful, rebirth is wonderful, but also terrible.
Cianna, I think we now know why in any room, Patrick Scar is the oldest white man in any room. What's terrible for you?
I was looking at Jimmy Kimmel Live and saw that Governor Pritzker was on the show. And what I thought was really funny was the fact that he decided on some nicknames for himself. And the nicknames are either J Beef or J Burger. And I got a kick out of that because it was kind of a spin on a joke from President Trump, who is calling him different names. And Jimmy Kimmel, on the other hand, he was like, what about JB Pizza or JB Baby Back Ribs, JB The Hut? So I thought that was funny, but also terrible in a sense. And now it's making me
Yeah,
hungry.
I think that is probably more terrible than funny, but I agree with you. All right, big finish now, Eleni.
Guys, I was coming into this serious. I would say one thing that's given me a migraine this week alone, terrible. It's going to be terrible. I would say is the 2026 election. Just this week alone, I was getting confused because I was seeing people's names pop up for races I didn't even know were open yet because of all the folks that are jumping into either the Senate race and then congressional seats open up. Then I saw, Jan Schakowsky's out, and now there's legislators that are filing for her seat. So Senator Laura Fine is someone who wants to run for Schakowsky's seat. So now I think two people have announced for Senator Laura Fine's seat in the Illinois Senate. And so it's just going to be truly terrible. I don't know how you can I don't know how we're going to, I think Rich Miller from Capital Facts said it last week. It's going to be a full-time job just keeping track of all the names and the seats that are going to be open this upcoming election cycle. So yeah, that's going to be terrible.
You know what they ought to do? They ought to just fill all these positions with the conclave.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it worked
Genius.
pretty good. Yeah.
Or ChatGPT.
Well, as long as killer robots aren't involved. So we appreciate you tuning in for another week of Frenemies of the People. It's definitely going to be terrible. Watch out for killer robots. Watch out for politicians. Watch out for Bob Herguth. Thanks, everybody.